up for Kevin Spacey. A little bit more.
Morning.
Keep clapping. Keep clapping.
Wow, you guys have had some coffee.
Kevin, thanks so much for being here. Look at this.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's me as Clarence Darrow.
You have been playing this character in some form or another for about 27 years now? 25 years?
Yeah, I first played him when I did a PBS television film about the life of Clarence Darrow called Darrow. And in that, I had to actually age. I mean, at some point, I played him at sort of in his 70s. And it's not terrible old age makeup. It's all right. But it was a really remarkable experience to do his life. And then I played him again when I was running the Old Vic Theatre. We put up a production of Inherit the Wind, in which Clarence Darrow is essentially the character of Drummond. They don't call him Darrow in the play. And of course, that was made into a great movie with Spencer Tracy playing Clarence Darrow. And so we did that play. And then I did this one-man show, which was originated in 1974 by the great actor Henry Fonda. He created this one-man show, and so we have put it back up, and I did it for my last show that I did at the Old Vic as artistic director. We did it for 6 weeks there, and now we're going to bring it to New York in a rather remarkable and unusual fashion.
What is that remarkable and unusual fashion?
Well, instead of doing it in a normal theater, we're going to do it in a place that has never done theater before, except there's a lot of drama that happens in this space all the time, and that's Arthur Ashe Stadium in Queens, where the U.S. Open is played. And it's kind of going to be great. We're not going to sell the whole stadium because it's 25,000 seats, but we will probably play to about 5,000 or 7,000 people over the each night that we do it. And we're doing it the 15th and the 16th of June. And we're going to build the set onto the court, and we won't use the whole court, so we're bringing 600 additional seats in. And I walk around the audience a lot. There's a tremendous amount of audience participation. I get people to read stuff. I pick on audience members a lot.
Some Don Rickles-like ribbing of the audience members?
I hope so. And he was a remarkable figure in our country. He was a great labor attorney for a very long time. In fact, is responsible for the 8-hour day. He won that in a landmark case in Pennsylvania. For the miners who were being quite abused in terms of their work conditions and hours that they were working. He also became a remarkable civil rights attorney, and later in life became a criminal defense attorney. And in fact, one of his most famous cases was also made into a film called Compulsion, in which Orson Welles played Clarence Darrow, and that was the very famous case called the Leopold and Loeb case in Chicago.
And the Leopold and Loeb case was the case of like two young men who thought that they'd killed somebody essentially to see if they could get away with it, to commit the perfect crime, right?
That's right, and not so perfect.
No, it really wasn't.
It wasn't so perfect. And actually, even in that case and many other cases, probably Darrow's his greatest accomplishment was that he defended 102 men against the death penalty and not a single one of them hanged. He managed to convince juries and judges that no one should die.
What keeps bringing you back to Clarence Darrow?
I just think right now in our world, I think he's a pretty incredible figure to hear from. His perspective, his homesprung logic, his sense of humor. There's a lot of comedy in the show as well. And I think that it's nice to hear a voice of reason, and particularly somebody who had such an impact on America and the way in which we view each other. The kind of struggles and things that he fought for, I think we're still fighting for and struggling for. So it's important to hear a man who was not afraid to put his head above the parapet.
When you played him for the first time in 1992 in that made-for-TV movie on PBS, were you thrilled by him then and expected to be coming back to him again and again? And do you go back to him in your personal life? Do you read his writings or just sort of regularly think about him?
Yeah, one of the great things about doing something like this is like friends of yours who know you're sort of obsessed with a figure, they like start finding stuff. So I recently got an incredible packet of gifts for my birthday, which were both books written by Darrow, but also possessions he actually owned, lectures and things that he had done or places that he had spoke at, the original pamphlets or the original published transcript. So I'm lucky in that sense. People keep giving me really cool things.
So you're becoming the authoritative voice on Clarence Darrow.
Well, look, it all started because I was very young. In 1974, I got the chance to see Henry Fonda play Clarence Darrow at a theater in Los Angeles, and he was one of my idols, and so it's always stayed with me in a big, big way.
Now, talking about who had the idea for Arthur Ashe Stadium.
That happened. Well, it happened because I went to the U.S. Open to the opening night 2 years ago, when I had just been doing the play in London, and I'd been thinking about wanting to do it in the United States, but we did it in the Round in London, and there aren't that many theaters in the Round. And so there I was on the opening night where they don't play tennis that night, they do a concert. So it's Phil Collins, and it's lit like a concert stage, and I was like, this is really a cool... Wait a minute. And then I thought, drama happens on that court all the time, but it's never been used for anything other than tennis. And I thought, if you didn't sell the whole place and you use the TV screens for close-ups, you could make this place feel really intimate. And I love the fact that I'm able to now say, I'm going to play Clarence Darrow on court. And I should just say that for those that are interested, if you're between 18 and 25, we've just announced we're giving away 100 tickets over the course of the 2 performances we're doing on the 15th and 16th of June, and you can go to kevinspaceyfoundation.com to pick those up, and everyone else goes to ticketmaster.com to get tickets for both those nights.
Now, you told me that you've been in rehearsal for a little while for Clarence on court. What does rehearsal look like? Where do you guys go? How do you block it, considering this is a completely different stage? I'd imagine that's what a lot of the rehearsal is.
We came to a tennis court. Really? Yeah, because they're all the same size. And so we laid out the stage as it will be, and I just started to rehearse. Oh, it's going to take me 15 feet to get over there instead of 5 feet, because it's a much bigger distance.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And I at some point, I hope I just don't hear a line judge saying foul.
At this point, do you just slip into Clarence? Is it very easy for you to slip into this character? Or do you have different versions of this character in regards to where it takes place?
Well, I mean, you know, we'll go into tech right away after I host the Tony Awards. And so we'll get, you know, I'll get 3 or so days chance to really feel what it feels like to play in that venue. Was
choosing this venue also sort of challenging yourself a little bit? Did you see this, and instead of putting on a big show with multiple cast members and maybe pyrotechnics of some kind, you're like, nah, just going to be me, and I'm going to see if I can do this? Well,
I make the argument that even in the worst seat in that house, people pay good money to watch a little yellow ball fly 120 miles an hour across the court. And I'm taller than a little yellow ball, and I don't move nearly as fast. But I think it will be really fun to see how we can, you know, have this place become a multi-purpose place. And as I say, I'll learn once I'm out there.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see it. You're also here to talk about the next season of House of Cards, season 5, right? Congratulations on...
Everyone excited? Yeah.
5 seasons of House of Cards. I want to roll a clip from House of Cards in just a second, but before we get to the new season and talk about it, when you shot the pilot for this, for Netflix, David Fincher directed it. It was really Netflix's first big foray into scripted television. Did you expect it to go on this long? I mean, it was an expensive, beautiful pilot directed by one of the best Hollywood directors. Did you expect it to sort of survive 5 seasons like this?
I mean, you know, you never know when you're working on something. You know, I had faith in David. I had faith in Bo Willimon, our creator and head writer. I had faith in the actors. I thought it was a really interesting story. But you never know what's going to hit with audiences and what's not going to hit. I mean, sometimes it's just it's a crapshoot. Sometimes I'm absolutely stunned at things that don't get attention, and sometimes, more often than not, I'm stunned at things that do.
Now, does David make you do 40, 50 takes like he does everybody else?
Yeah, he basically beats the acting out of me.
Let's look at a clip of season 5 of House of Cards and then talk about it.
One of the murderers who killed Mr. Jim Miller is still out there, at large. How much more proof do you people need? I demand that every member of this House take a stand. Like FDR before and Wilson before him, I I demand that this Congress declare a formal declaration of war against ICO, both here and abroad.
Motion to adjourn. Second. The House will adjourn. The President will cease.
I will not cease. I will never cease.
Get into the nitty-gritty of the plot without spoiling anything, but considering the world right now, what's it like that it feels like American politics are actually competing with the plot lines of House of Cards?
Well, that's fine. If they want to compete with us, that's fine. I don't feel any necessity to compete with them. I think what's interesting is that, over a number of years, there's been a lot of commentary about how there's certain things on House of Cards that people think are, yes, maybe that couldn't possibly happen in Washington. That seems unrealistic. But now I kind of feel like people are thinking, oh, gosh, we were ahead of our time.
Or like it was happening, they were just better at keeping it a secret for a little while. You're coming back for season 5, right? You have new showrunners. They've been with the show for a little while.
That's right.
But the season does feel a little bit different. It feels faster paced. It feels like you guys are churning and burning through story in a beautiful way.
Yeah,
Was
I think that even though Beau Willimon left the show, I think that our respect for him, our desire to continue with the same sort of taut storytelling, plot devices, interesting new characters, we've tried to honor that. And I had an incredible time this season. And I think that, for people who think that, oh, well, House of Cards is going to be boring this time around compared to what's really going on in the world, I just say, just fasten your seatbelt.
Now, you're a producer on the show, right? You're an executive producer. How involved do you get with the writing and the storylines, and where are you possibly seeing Frank and his administration?
Yeah, I've been involved from the very beginning, and to one degree or another, greater or less on a particular season, just depending on where it's going and where I think that my ideas or my voice is of value. And I have a great relationship with our writers, and we challenge each other, and that's a great circumstance to be in, where the egos are left at the door, and we're trying to serve the show as best as we possibly can, and go places where we feel an audience won't expect us to go. I love surprising audiences and doing some things that are unusual.
Do you think Frank is a villain?
No, but that's because I can't, as an actor, make that kind of moral judgment. Because also villainy is not something you can play. It's not active. And so, even if you're playing Richard III doesn't think of himself as a villain. I mean, he's a person making choices, trying to get and achieve what he wants to get and achieve. And you just have to sort of focus on what a person wants and what they're willing to do to get there, rather than sitting outside of a character and making some moral assessment of them, because it just doesn't do you any good.
That's a classic sort of dramatist thing that they teach, right? It's always about what the character wants. That is what...
I don't know. I fell asleep in dramatist school. No idea.
Dramatist school?
Dramatist school. I think I may have just made that up.
I think maybe I made it up for you.
You did.
Led you into
I'll give
that.
you some credit, and then I'll leave, and I'll take full credit.
Do you love playing Frank?
I do. It's very complex, very interesting. I also find that the character has a lot of humor. There's a lot of our ability to sort of use humor in a way. Sometimes I guess my writers always tell me it's unusual that I'm one of the only actors they know who's constantly saying, I don't think I should say these lines. Because sometimes, for example, in the direct address stuff, there'll be like a paragraph that they'll have written, and I'll just go, I don't need to say any of this. All I need to do is just look at the audience. I just need to glance at the camera, and we all know where we are. We all know what we're feeling, and I don't need to say anything. So quite often I'm reducing the amount of work that I have to say.
Do you think they ever take that as like, oh, Kevin doesn't want to do the work today?
No, I think they get it. They get the fact that I'm just trying to make it clean and streamline it.
Maybe that's why they've been adding so much more plot this season. They got to fill time because you just keep cutting scenes from the
lines. Yeah, that's right.
You are also in town because you're hosting the Tonys.
Yes.
That is amazing. Give it up for hosting the Tonys right here. What is that like? What is that process like?
Well, apparently, the first part of the process is they ask everyone other than you to host, and everyone turns it down, and then when they get to about the 16th or 17th person, they finally come and ask you to host. And you go, yeah, okay, that sounds like a great idea.
Do you feel like you can have more fun hosting something like the Tonys than it seems like people have hosting the Oscars, which is such a big procedure?
Well, the Tonys is a pretty big event. I mean, certainly in the theater world, it is the Oscars of the theater. And I love the theater. I'm a theater rat, as you know. I ran the Old Vic for 12 seasons, and I get more satisfaction in doing theater than almost anything else that I'm able to do. So I'm delighted to be able to celebrate this season on Broadway. There's some great work, some great musicals. I'm actually trying now to catch up over the next couple of weeks and see everything I can.
Even going out to see some
It's 8 shows a week for me for the next couple of weeks, for sure, yeah.
What have you seen recently?
I saw Groundhog Day, which is really fun, and Dear Evan Hansen, which is a beautiful piece of theater. And as the weeks go on, I'll be seeing almost everything I can.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how often do you get to do that? Do you get to actually go to the theater and see a lot?
I binge theater, you know, where you literally go Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday matinee, Saturday night, Sunday matinee, and then Monday you collapse.
That sounds like so much fun.
Yeah.
Do you find that you still learn from other actors and learn from other pieces? That you're still learning as an actor as you get older?
Yeah, I hope I never stop learning. I think that there's something incredibly wonderful about going into a space where all of us are strangers, and yet we come into a room and the lights go down, and if the actors and the director and the playwright, in the case of musical, the music has done its job, we all get transported to a different land, and we all, in about 10 minutes, start believing that the things we're seeing up on that stage are real. And it's the most artificial thing in the world. I mean, let's face it, there's big exit signs and programs and yet somehow the genius of theater is that it can transport us to different places, and we learn about each other as much as I'm able to learn about the craft that I'm in by watching great performers, directors do their craft.
Now, going into hosting the Tonys, did you have any ideas as to what sort of bits you wanted to do, how you wanted to present the Tonys? How did you work with the writers?
We are working constantly as I speak. I can't really go into any detail other than to say that I'm setting out to have a really fun, entertaining evening in which we celebrate the American theater.
And these are on June 9th. The Tonys are on
June 11th.
June 11th. Excuse me.
June 11th.
Excuse me. My fault. Maybe they should.
The 9th I'll be rehearsing.
The 9th will be rehearsing.
I'll be rehearsing.
People can come by and maybe try to get in to see him rehearse, but the show's on the 11th.
Show's on the 11th, yeah.
One more thing to talk about before we turn it over to audience questions. It's an incredibly busy time for you. You have so many things going on right now. Baby Driver, the Edgar Wright film, the anticipated Edgar Wright film. I love his movies. They're so much fun.
You guys see the Shaun of Dead movies? Scott Pilgrim Against the World?
Love that movie.
That's this very fine director, Edgar Wright. We've made a heist movie, and Ansel Elgort plays Baby Driver, and I play his boss, Doc. And Jamie Foxx is in it, and John Hamm is in it, and the music's awesome, because the way Edgar makes movies is he sort of figures out every track he wants in the film before he writes it. And then he writes it with the music in mind, and then when you come to set, very often he's playing the track that's going to be in that scene so that you have the right rhythm of physical things that you're doing, so you're in the beat of the music. It's really cool.
Now, I heard he wrote this a really long time ago, and it is a musical, essentially, right?
Well, music drives it.
But it's not, no one breaks out into song?
No, but people do break out into other things.
Do you get any car chases in it?
I don't want to give anything away, except to say that when we do the prequel, there will be lots of car sequences that I'll be in.
All right, let's get some questions here from the audience. Who has some questions? Right there.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Okay, I have a question for you. Politicians have a very specific psychological profile. For example, I am from Venezuela, and as you know, we had a extremist megalomaniac leader who was Hugo Chavez. For you as an actor, what specific characteristics did you develop to create Frank Underwood?
Well, a lot of it is in the writing. I mean, from the very beginning, if you may or may not know that there was an original British series called House of Cards, in which there was a character who was the whip in Parliament, who was worming his way to become Prime Minister, and his name was Francis Urquhart. But we changed the name because we thought Urquhart didn't quite sound American. But we kept the initials, so he is F.U. So a lot of it is in the writing and the conversations that we had from the very beginning, because when David Fincher, who, as you mentioned, directed the first 2 episodes, we went back and looked at that original series, and we started talking about how could this show translate as an American show? What kind of figure would this new Frank be? Where would he be from? At what point in his career would we find him? So there was a lot of discussions in terms of which we laid the foundation of who we felt this person was. And I remember David would often say to me, you know, I'd shoot something in those first couple of weeks, and he'd walk up to me and say, I think it's deeper and darker and uglier than you're going right now. I want to see how deep and ugly it is. So let's try it again. And it was take 59 and... But we eventually got there, and I think that one of the other things that's fun is that if you start off accepting that you don't know everything, that there's a lot about this character that I'm still learning about as we go along. That's a very exciting place to find myself in season 5.
Were there any congressmen or senators that you were inspired by, just vocally, or how they carried themselves?
No, we basically made a decision we weren't going to try to base the Underwoods on anybody, although people make comparisons to, obviously, real-life politicians. But our interest was to create characters that we felt were unique. I did spend some time prior to our shooting with Kevin McCarthy, who at the time was the whip in the House. And the funny story about that is, when I reached out to him and asked him if he would let me sort of trail him to understand what being a whip was like, he refused to meet me.
Really?
Until he found out I was playing a Democrat. and then he met me, and I spent a couple of weeks trailing him, and I learned a lot about what it is to actually be the whip.
Now, I have a specific kind of nerdy question about directing actors, but when David Fincher says to you, do it deeper, do it darker, is that a good direction? Because so often you hear that, you know, stuff like that's really hard for an actor to do. It needs to be action-oriented or focused on things that you can actually sort of physically do.
Sometimes it depends on the scene. It depends on what the demands of the scene are. And also it depends on your relationship. You know, when you have very, very specific kinds of conversations that Dave and I had throughout, then a direction like that makes sense, because I'm operating not just with that direction, but with a whole lot of stuff that we have talked about and established early on.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. Spacey.
Hi.
Thank you for being here today. So my question is, I know Jack Lemmon was a big influence on you in your career, and I wanted to ask, what was it like that at the end of the day you ended up working with him, and what was the best piece of advice that you were ever given?
The best piece of advice Jack Lemmon ever gave me was, he said, pull yourself together, people are talking. I was very fortunate. I met Jack Lemmon when I was very young. I met him when I was 13 years old at a workshop. And he put his hand on my shoulder and told me that he thought acting was what I was meant to do with my life. And so I took his advice, I went to New York, and then 12 years later I got the chance to audition to play his son in a Broadway production of a great American play called Long Day's Journey into Night, and I won the role. And so I got the chance to work with my idol every single night for over a year. And then we ended up doing 3 films together, ending with Glengarry Glen Ross, which Jack used to love to call Gene Barry Glenn Close. He said it was easier to say. And it was an extraordinary... you went on that one, didn't you? It was
a silly thing to say for such a serious work. Like, I see him saying it to David Mamet, and Mamet being like, oh, come on.
I love that Glenn Close picture. It's terrific. So it was really remarkable to be able to discover that my idol, no matter what Hollywood glory had come to him, it never went to his head. He deeply cared about other people. And he had a philosophy in life, which I've sort of stolen as my own, which is that if you've done well in the business you wanted to do well in, then it's your obligation to send the elevator back down, which is how he always worded it. And I only found out later, what makes that so brilliant, is that Jack Lemmon was born in an elevator in Boston, Massachusetts. And so that's why I have my own foundation now. The Kevin Spacey Foundation is in large measure inspired by Jack Lemmon.
Do you have a favorite Jack Lemmon movie that really inspired you?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, The Apartment, I think, is a film that probably had the biggest influence on me, and particularly because we used his performance in The Apartment, Sam Mendes and I, as a template for what we wanted to try to achieve with Lester Burnham in American Beauty.
Last question right here.
Hi, Mr. Spacey, huge fan. So I was going to ask something about Glengarry Glen Ross too, but I guess we'll just switch it up. The movie The Big Kahuna, one of my favorites. It almost takes place just in like one room, except for like 2 scenes. Also, like, your character is almost, it's not the same as the one from Glengarry Glen Ross, but like there are similarities. Do you find like certain techniques to like change up the way you act, even though the characters could be similar? And what are those techniques?
Well, I think that in many ways we're all similar, you know? I mean, we all want the same things, have the same desires, want to be understood, want to be loved, want to have affection, want to be able to have open conversations with our friends and others. So I often find that there are similarities in characters, but what you're always looking for is what makes this person different. Does the playwright, and in this case of The Big Kahuna, that was a play that we turned into a film. I loved that experience working with Danny DeVito. I thought it was a really complex and interesting story to tell, and we shot that entire film in 16 days. Yeah, 16 days.
Was that fun, or was that?
I love it. I love it when you have a chance to try to achieve something in a brief period of time. So I believe that you fill the time you have. If you have 6 weeks, you'll take 6 weeks. If you have 3 days, you'll take 3 days. If you have as much time as we've had, now
One interview.
we're pretty much done, I think.
We're pretty much done.
We filled the time we had.
On that note, Clarence Darrow at Court is after the Tonys. What days can people see this?
June 15th and 16th are the 2 performances that happen, 8 o'clock
Next
at
week.
Arthur Ashe.
Sorry.
Ticketmaster.com, KevinSpaceyFoundation.com for the lottery for young tickets.
And next week, House of Cards will
House
be
of Cards
back.
drops on May
season
30th.
5. Tonys, June 11th.
Jeez, people are never going to remember all these dates, man.
Just put it at the bottom of the page. He's got a bunch of stuff that you can go see. Clarence Darrow at Court.
Thank you all
Kevin
very
Spacey,
much.
everybody.